My guest today is Dr Christian Reynolds, who is a reader at the Centre for Food Policy in the City University of London. And Christian is an expert on sustainable diets, including climate impacts and food waste. We've also collaborated on a few projects, including some really fun events, talking with the public about the impact of food on climate change. So I've been really looking forward to this chat. And thanks so much for coming on the podcast, Christian.
It's a pleasure to be with you today, Sarah.
Amazing. Well, there's a whole range of topics we could talk about, but the thing I want to focus on today is cooking, because I get asked about this a lot. And we can spend a lot of time analysing where our foods come from and thinking about how it's travelled and packaged and so on. But do we spend enough time thinking about what happens once that food is in our kitchen? And we did some research on this a few years ago with our fantastic collaborators, didn't we? And I guess, you know, a lot of the estimates of greenhouse gas emissions only really consider up to the supply chain, up to the farm gate or when it gets to the shop. So I'm restraining myself from giving away the main results of that work because I'd like you to share that. So if we're talking to people about, you know, going back and changing the way they're cooking, you know, how important is that compared to changing, you know, what they put in the food in the first place?
Oh, that's tough. So you're meaning what they put in a recipe?
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay. What's in your recipe is much more important than how you cook it, sadly. But how you cook it does add to that once you've ticked all the other boxes. So a potato, cabbage, any of these vegetables, it's about 40% of the impact for that single ingredient. But when you bring it into a complex dish, the protein in that dish, so the beef, the lamb, the seafood, the egg, the butter, the cheese, whatever it is, that's the main dominant environmental impact. And so that's more the thing that matters. But cooking needs to be part of that because you want to enjoy whatever you eat and you need to be considering that in a hedonic way and understanding where people are at. Sorry, that was a really complex answer.
No, I really like that because I think you're bringing in the fact that climate impact is one aspect of what we're doing, but actually we've got to enjoy our food and we've got a finite amount of time available to cook it in. So this is just one factor.
And a finite budget.
Finite budget, yeah, brilliant. Okay. And so, you know, I guess this is sort of for people who have already done lots of other things to reduce the climate impact of their diet. And now they're saying, you know, what else can I do that would help when the cooking comes to that? Brilliant. This is something you've been looking at for a while. Why do you think that cooking hasn't always been taken into account in the data?
Well, I think cooking hasn't been taken into account because, and this is kind of a pun, but kind of not, cooking's messy, cooking's hard, cooking's complicated. And as people involved in sustainability or life cycle assessment specifically, you need to be in control and know what process is happening so you can assign the correct numbers to the environmental impact that happens. And in the supermarket, in the production chain on the farm, we can get those numbers quite easily. But once you go into people's households, there's a lot more uncertainty there. And that means that we just don't know typically how people are cooking, how people are using, the amounts of waste. All of these things have to be collected by survey data, which leads to a lot more uncertainty. And for a long time, and in some ways it's still the case, the environmental impact of the use phase, which cooking is part of, is not as big than other parts of the food system's environmental impacts. But as we sort out the problems of the wider food system, we need to start tackling the not low-hanging fruit anymore. We need to start figuring out the solutions that are available to consumers. And that's where cooking comes into that. And so we need to have that understanding of cooking and how people are cooking, why people are cooking the way they are, to enact wider systems change and to be able to support people in that. Because I guess the part of the reason I come into this is a lot of sustainability and sustainable diet discussion is individualistic. It's saying you need to do this. And here at the Centre for Food Policy, we're talking about systemic change. How does the system need to change to support the individual? It's not just about the individual, because otherwise it's a battle on every plate, on every dinner table for the rest of all time. And that doesn't sound achievable. What does sound achievable is the entire system changing to support people to cook in a healthy, sustainable way and cook delicious food. Like, isn't that what we're all actually wanting? But there are barriers to that. Gosh, that was a lot of information there. So in short,
Brilliant.
Cooking's been complicated, and so that's why we've not focused on it until myself, you, and multiple other collaborators, we all sat down and said, let's try this. Let's try and actually get some good numbers. And again, there have been people since the 1990s trying to put numbers to this, but I feel we were one of the first groups to ever sit down and say, well, let's try for 30 foods simultaneously, all the cooking methods we can think of for those foods for the UK. Let's do this.
Brilliant. Well, that's really compelling. Yeah. So if we think about about like a baked potato. I mean, when I first heard about the impact of food on climate change, I went vegan and I probably stood by my oven cooking my baked potato, feeling really smug. But then realised that actually, if you're putting your baked potato in the oven for 2 hours, you've just generated 2,000 grams of emissions compared to like 76 for a microwave. So cooking in an oven, you know, is quite significant compared to your daily sort of budget for food impacts on climate change, whereas microwave, not much at all. But that's just me cooking a potato, whereas you had this idea of actually looking at survey data and trying to find out what everyone else is doing. So can you tell everyone sort of from the research point of view how that worked out?
Yeah, no. So this was the piece of research we did. So we looked across different products and asked around 700 people in the UK and then multiple other countries as well. So it's both interesting in terms of, say, how the UK population cooks a potato. Is it mainly done in the oven, which it is, but other sorts of people do it, or, you know, chop it up, fry it on the hob, microwave it, pressure cook it, etc. There's lots of different ways you can cook a potato, as you've said, and that leads to differences in environmental impact. And again, your books, let's be honest here, those infographics that you produce just going, actually relative, yes, the oven for a single potato is a massive, ineffective ball of hot air, meaning energy to create hot air to surround one potato. And so I guess the way I started proposing when I'm talking and doing public engagement is saying, well, you know, you can microwave the jacket potato for 7 minutes and then finish it in an oven or under the grill to crispen it up so you still get that crispy skin. Because, you know, a lot of pushback when we do this discussion is saying, oh, but a microwave baked potato, it's not got the crunch, it's not got the fluffiness. But you can replicate those things by using different parts. So, for instance, if we're talking just in terms of monetary cost with the current cost of living, money, energy use, you're talking about a jacket potato in the microwave, the cooking is 5p. For an hour in the oven, it's £1 for a single jacket potato.
Wow.
If you're doing a hybrid of the two, it's kind of a more reasonable 39p. So if you're kind of thinking about a bit in the oven, so you're putting it in hot from the microwave into a cold oven, turning it on for those 20 minutes so it comes up to a crispy temperature. So the Maillard reaction starts happening. The caramel
we like the geeky stuff.
Yeah, we want to get to the geeky stuff. The Maillard starts happening. Caramelization starts happening on the skin. We're drying out the skin, and then we're taking it out of there. So it's a cooked potato. It's crispy. It's fluffy. It's all those things. 39p rather than £1-ish.
Just before you go on to the next topic, why are ovens so bad? You know, what's so different about? Could you tell people what's different about an oven to a microwave? You know, fundamentally.
Oh, okay. So. Shall we do the fun one? Ovens are just a load of hot air. And so ovens are effective at what they're there for, which is to heat up and then cook by convection. So they're heating up air, and then the air is transferring that heat energy into the food. It's usually hot, dry air. And if you could get a steam oven, that means that the heat is being transferred through steam, which is better at entering the food. Likewise, air fryers are just a fancy term for an oven, but they're smaller ovens and they're therefore much more effective. So, you know, I've run the numbers back in the day, I think it was about a year ago, for an air fryer. It was about, if a oven cost £1 for the baked potatoes for one, it was about 70p for the air fryer. But
okay, it's not that different actually. Why is that?
But it's still more different than, so it's less than an oven, but it's not all the way. So it's still more sustainable. It depends how many you're cooking for. And it's the speed, it's the convenience, and it's just heating up a smaller amount of hot air.
Well, and can I think about it as maybe like the oven, you know, you've got this big metal box, basically heating all that metal as well as the air. So if you've got a smaller amount of metal, is that, and also the preheating time for the oven.
Yeah, so the air fryer preheats faster, all of these different things. But again, hacks that you can do. So I advised a food charity hubbub on, depending on the meal you're producing, you can put things in for preheat. So vegetables, doesn't matter. Put them in while you're preheating, bring them up to temperature. And then for cakes, for instance, you can turn your oven off for the last 10 to 15 minutes and it will still have enough thermal mass inside to continue to cook, depending on which cake and how dense and those sorts of things. So it's use your own judgment, use your own, you know.
So it's having it on, switched on for less time, basically, is the key. Yeah. So should everyone go out and buy an air fryer, though?
No.
Okay, so why is that then?
So
I think they already have, right? It might be too late. I mean,
yeah, no, it might be too late. Like, again, I think each of us has bought into tribes of different machines, such as Instapot or air fryer, etc., because they are more electric and more contained, and you know they are a consumable present. But they all embody manufactured carbon. So you're producing new equipment, and so the calculations we did in terms of should you get a new induction stovetop, the energy you would save from switching from a current gas or current energy stovetop to a new induction stovetop, it's a 5 to 10 year payback window. Mm-hmm. So it's about how you use what you've got, not buying new things in the first instance. With the energy price spikes of the last year, so, the 2021 energy price spike, etc., that starts making the payback window 3 years-ish, and that starts to make more economic sense. So from an environmental perspective, it's just more energy, more carbon produced. Why don't you use what you've got? You've already got pots and pans. You can cook more effectively with those. You've probably got a microwave. But if you're thinking more broadly, it's then saying, if you're going to be upgrading your kitchen anyway, or if you're wanting to buy a thing, make sure you've just done the diligence on that, as it were.
Cool. As we're rambling all around the subject of cooking and greenhouse gas emissions. Brilliant. Well, I know that you personally spend a lot of time experimenting with different cooking appliances, and you mentioned a few there. So, what's your favourite appliance and why? And I guess, how does that fit in with the research that we've done?
Oh, that's a hard one. So my current favourite is a pressure cooker and Instapot, just because the Brazilian collaborators introduced me to it.
And just to be clear, other brands of pressure cooker are available. Yeah. Other
brands of pressure cooker are definitely available. There's a brilliant community from India called One Pot, One Shot, which is OPOS. It is basically an online community of electric pressure cooker nerds who have a YouTube channel, and they're looking at how you can create traditional Indian curries by layering your Instapot correctly. You close the lid once, press it for a certain amount of time, leave it, vent, open, and stir, and you've got yourself either a thali with 3 or 4 meals cooking simultaneously. It's crazy.
Wow,
We've done it a couple of times.
Yeah.
But besides that, it's also just interesting seeing the speed. So there's a great cookery writer in the UK who has a book, Catherine Phipps, Modern Pressure Cooking, and her macaroni cheese is quite amazing for a crowd. So you can rustle up a macaroni cheese in a pressure cooker.
I am shocked that you can do pasta successfully in a pressure cooker. I'd have thought it'd go kind of soggy and kind of a bit.
It's all about timings. And so if you're into controlling, your cooking to the next degree, 10 minutes to table, but 8 minutes of active stuff, and you've got a decent macaroni cheese for a crowd.
Wow.
Depends on how you like your macaroni cheese, though. So if you're liking crunchy bits on top, you're going to have to crunch it up or put croutons on or something. But yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. So you got your pressure cooker there. And, in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, people might be concerned that that's going to be quite hot. How does that compare? Tell people with an oven. Yeah.
No. Really good point. So a pressure cooker is... so this is where it gets hard. So in terms of math, a pressure cooker is 38 pence per hour-ish. That's per kilowatt hour. So if you're thinking about active time, that's 0.6 pence per minute. So if you're thinking in terms of, I was saying about that macaroni cheese, so it's about 10 minutes of pressure cooking, because you kind of saute your onions and stuff in it, and then you add your stuff. So let's say 10 minutes overall, so 0.6p times 10. So is that 6p?
6 pence? Okay.
Yeah, 6 pence for cooking that meal.
Right.
So equivalent to microwaves, equivalent to a slow cooker. And again, if you've got a slow cooker, a lot of people have a slow cooker looking at the back. You don't need new kit. You can do a lot of these different sorts of things with a slow cooker. It just takes more time.
So I love my slow cooker, definitely, because I use my it's a pressure cooker, but it's got a slow cooker setting. So currently got a chili in there, actually. I must remember to take all that out. But it's not very obvious maybe that a slow cooker, again, that's on for a very long time. So we've just said, use appliances for less time, but now we're saying a slow cooker. So, how does that compare?
So the old-fashioned slow cookers, and again modern, they're using the energy use of, say, an old incandescent bulb style. Mm-hmm. So
really
you're
low energy.
About 8p for the hour, or about 0.1p per minute. So it's really small, but you've also got to leave it on for 6 hours. So again, if we're talking about 8p per hour times 6 hours, you're talking about, what was that?
48p.
48p for that dish. And really, actually, you're only needing probably 3 to 4 hours for cooking. And so, you can get beans from soaked to, and then residual heat for the rest. And, there's been interventions. There's a thing called the Wonder Bag.
I was going to ask you about that. Excellent.
Okay. Tell me about the Wonder Bag.
What do you think about it? Yeah, because I've been experimenting with cooking in a thermos flask, or cooking, basically adding hot water or heating something up for a short period of time and then just leaving it for ages to actually do the cooking. Different ways of doing that, including this Wonder Bag, basically putting a pot in a big insulated container and then leaving it for ages. So have you experimented with that? What's your thoughts on that?
I have. So the Wonder Bag is a bag produced by communities in different parts of Africa. It's an aid project to get money into those communities. You could call it haybox cookery, but it's kind of a giant bean bag with a beautiful different sorts of African patterned fabrics on the outside, which you bring your pot up to the boil, just a standard pot, and the key thing up to the boil, and then you place it inside this, draw the string, and it's a giant bean bag filled with polyesters, which keeps the heat in for about 6 to 8 hours. So this is where food safety needs to be mentioned.
Okay.
And so different microbes breed at different rates depending on heat, and I'm not a certified food scientist, but it's useful to just think about the bacteria and time and temperature type things. So the danger zone is between 8 to 60 degrees centigrade. And below 8, bacteria rates are slowed. Below 5,
so like in a fridge, for example.
Slowed. Yeah. So in the fridge.
Okay.
And go and check So pro tip, 60% of fridges are above the recommended fridge. There's a website called Chill the Fridge Out. If you search for Chill the Fridge Out.
Okay. We'll put it in the notes.
It will give you a manual for how to take your fridge purchased in the UK or US to the correct below settings. And the math that we've done shows that the food waste reduction from keeping it at the right settings is actually more, you'll save more from that extra day or two of shelf life than you would pay in energy cost.
Right.
So we've got that's currently under review in a journal. That piece of
nice.
Fun math. Anyway, digressing, where were we going? We were going to bacterial spoilage.
So 60 degrees.
So 60 degrees is kind of when it starts to get problematic. You need to cook something at 60 degrees for 45 minutes for kind of, so the standard advice is to cook something to 70 degrees and keep it at that temperature for 2 minutes. So after that, there's again, not a food scientist, but from my understanding and reading, at 2 minutes, 70 degrees, there's a no
so you kill all the bacteria.
It's a lower risk after that point.
Yeah.
The other combinations would be 80 degrees for 6 seconds, 75, 30 seconds, down to 60 degrees for 45 minutes. So a slow cooker is already going to be getting above 65 degrees. Pretty much, and being there. But so it's just at these low temperature things, making sure the core temperature of whatever you're cooking is already above that temperature and is being held there for at least that amount of time. So if we're bringing that pot of thing to boiling, and then you put it into that's where you want to go.
And then there's a question of something like pasta or red lentils I've tried, where you may just realise they're not been cooked for long enough, and so they're not very nice, which is definitely the crunch factor, not good. Just to be clear about maybe lots of types of beans, obviously that's a different thing again, isn't it? We don't want kidney beans at 70 degrees, so that would be bad. So sous vide, I didn't know what sous vide meant when you first mentioned it. So are you keen on that still, or is that something you did before?
So sous vide literally means, I think it's without air. It's vacuum sealing something and then into a plastic bag, and then you submerge that plastic bag into a water bath, which is kept at a specific temperature. So again, highly energy efficient, and you can bulk scale that to the nth degree. So you can be, I've seen, say, Fat Duck, who's the not Fergus Henderson. I'm Hespen Blumenthal. There's a TV show where he sous vides in a spa bath an entire carcass at once. So what you're doing is you're keeping at that water temperature, but it means you can spit roast the entire pig. So you get it to the right temperature. So I guess sous vide is great if you're in an industry and where you're needing to scale and where you're needing control and precision. For me, on a day-to-day basis, it's just too much faff and a load of plastic waste, which I don't need if I've got a slow cooker and I've got a pressure cooker. I don't need those things in my life. So my main message is you don't need anything new to cook sustainably. Use the equipment you have, and you don't need to adopt any new gadgets. If you're into new gadgets, you can use them more sustainably. The other thing to think about is the rapid decarbonization of the grid and what that means for our discussion today. And so the energy grid, while I've been researching this, so I did my PhD in food waste back in 2008 to 2014, and then switched to healthy, sustainable diets with food waste. Since I've even been there, since 2010-ish, the amount of energy use and where we generate that energy from globally in the UK, Australia, where I'm from, they've all changed and we've decarbonized the grid. So a potato now in an oven is more environmentally friendly than it was a decade ago.
And just to be clear, so the grid, we're talking about, you've got electricity coming into your kitchen, and we're talking about where does that come from? Is it renewables? Is it coal? And so on. And you're saying we're using a lot more renewables nowadays, and so it's actually not as bad. Yeah, okay.
The at-home energy use and energy use across the food system has been a driving source of decarbonisation. And so if I'm being brutally honest with my own self, it's switch to a renewable energy supplier as your first thing. The cooking's second to all of that, but the sustainable cooking helps you change what you're cooking as well and how protein-centric you are.
Is it better if we all eat out where they're cooking in a big oven?
This is really interesting. So this was my first postdoc paper back in 2012, 2013. I did this research. And so for Australia, we looked at basically the carbon footprint of eating out versus eating at home. And and because it was kind of aggregated, a meal eating out is this, a meal at home is this, you choose different things in and outside the home and people scale differently. And so on aggregate, eating out kitchens are just much more energy efficient than home kitchens. So yes, we should all eat out more if you carry that narrative, but also the choices you make when you're outside the home are typically less sustainable choices because you are choosing more luxury goods, more fancy goods, etc. And
something like more meat, for example.
More meat-centric dishes. And at least until 2015, there were less vegetarian, vegan options on menus. There are definitely since 2015. So what's that now? That's nearly a decade now, where there has been more than just the goat's cheese tart or the butternut squash risotto of being the two default menu options. There's lots of different plant-based options on a menu. But at the same point, what people want from a menu, depending on if it's quick service, if it's smart casual, the different cuisine types that you have, the carbon footprint of each of those meals will be different, and the types of cooking involved in each of those meals. But overall, kitchens, and particularly dark kitchens, for instance, or which are pumping out hundreds and hundreds of meals in a very small space,
so this is just like things that happen away from restaurants that people can order from. Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them might be using, so if you're in the UK, there's a pub chain called Wetherspoons, but many other pub chains are available, of course, but they have steam ovens, and lots of different places have steam ovens, which again have racks of things, and you can control the temperature at each stage of it because it's injecting steam in there. And it means you're cooking specifically for what's on that shelf at that point and being very, very energy efficient.
Well, you've given loads of tips that people can try out already. Is there anything else you wanted to add in terms of other tips?
Told you about the fridge.
Yeah, got the fridge.
Told you about microwaving followed by other things, or pressure cooking followed by other things.
Excellent.
Freezer use.
Oh, yes, I like the freezer use one, because actually people ask about that.
Yeah, because chilling is as important as cooking, shall we say.
Mm-hmm.
So did you know you can freeze milk? Did you know you can freeze cheese? So a big part of my research on both plastic packaging, food waste, etc., shows that most people aren't using their freezer as effectively as they could. Mm-hmm. And so it could be just thinking about making sure that people are portion controlling and putting stuff into the freezer and remembering it's there. And so if you're going away traveling, for instance, you could decant your milk into an ice cube tray, whack it in there, and you'll have milk ready for when you come back, and you can defrost quite quickly. Again, it's additional mental labor and many other sorts of things, and it doesn't fit everybody. I know share houses throughout London definitely like, we don't have freezer space. What are you talking about? So understand if it fits your lifestyle. But bread, milk, cheese. So a big block of cheese, you could chop it into smaller bits and then whack it into the fridge. So you're only using what you need for that recipe, etc. Those are all possible things. Plus, if you're thinking about the supermarkets, what I used to call yellow or orange sticker roulette. So you'd go at closing time and all of their cheeses would be at discount prices. You can just go and take that, chop it up, whack it in the freezer, and you've got quite nice cheese at a very affordable price ready for you whenever you want.
Brilliant.
So using your freezer, using tinned goods where you need to, because the nutritional loss from tinning or freezing is negligible compared to getting vegetables inside you.
Brilliant. And I guess, so you're saying freezing is great for reducing food waste, and what a lot of people are surprised at is that the energy you use in order to do that freezing is really quite small and massively outweighed by the fact that you're not wasting food. Amazing. Okay, we're going to move on to the final question now, which I've been asking everybody, is what are you going to have for dinner tonight?
Right. What am I having for dinner tonight? We are going to have a French soup, which I'm going to mangle the pronunciation of, but it's basically soup de pesto or de pistou, which is a spring soup. So it's beans, it's a little bit of pasta, it's lots of vegetables. It's a minestrone, which you then put a giant blob of pesto on top of.
Amazing.
So it's kind of lots of green veg and lots of other stuff in a soup with a little bit of pasta, and then you put a blob of pesto on top to make it taste like springy and stuff.
Wow.
So that's what's going to be done in the pressure cooker.
That's what I was going to ask you. How are you cooking it? Okay, amazing. Okay, well, I hope you enjoy your soup to pea stew tonight. And thanks so much. It's been really fun chatting with you, Christian. Thanks again for coming on the podcast. Thanks.
Pleasure talking as always, Sarah. Bye.
Lovely to see you. Bye.